Hello everyone, I'm Gunnison and welcome back to Spinning the Tires. NASCAR's Bristol Dirt Race is finally in the books and it was one for the history books. Let's look over all the interesting stories that came out of this week's race. Alright, so first of all, let's look at how the race turned out. A lot of people going into this weekend, I think they thought it was going to turn out to be either a boring race, just one groove racetrack, or it was going to be absolute chaos and no good racing. But we actually had a good balance of each, and I actually kind of predicted this. I predicted that this race would kind of have a chaotic start as the drivers were all getting used to the track and the conditions. But as we went through the race, things would, as the bottom line wore in and so on, things would get a little more tame. And that's exactly how it turned out. But it never got too tame. It never got to be to the point where it was boring. It was, towards the end, mostly a one groove racetrack. Most people using the bottom lane of the racetrack. A few people tried to make moves on the outside line. There were some times that it worked, especially towards the beginning of the race. But most of the time it was that bottom line that was dominant. And yeah, but went from kind of chaotic race um, to a more tame race, and it was entertaining the whole way through, really. Uh, yeah, but let's look at some of the chaotic wrecks that were caused because of the. So let's look at some of the wrecks that happened in this race and the consequences that those had on the racing itself. So early on in the race, Eric Almirola wrecked, collecting the 7 of Corey LaJoie, the 38 of Anthony Alfredo, and a few others. Um, the cause of this wreck was very interesting. Last week, I went over Bristol Motor Speedway's dirtles, which are these white painted bumps in the track meant to keep drivers from going too low on the racetrack. I stated that I kind of thought they were unnecessary, and I'll hold to that argument now because looking at replays, it looks like what sent Eric Almirola around was he got pushed down to the bottom of the racetrack by another car, and that dirtle got him out of control, and he spun around and was just along for the ride. The other interesting and very consequential wreck that happened was when Christopher Bell spun out in turn 2, collecting Kyle Larson. Now, the big thing there was Christopher Bell and Kyle Larson were the two favorites for the race, and they got collected in one wreck. Christopher Bell was unable to continue in the race, and then Kyle Larson, he got back out on the track, but with a very damaged car, he never really was in contention again. So that shook things up a bit. That took out some of the big players. The last big wreck that happened was midway through the race. There was a large accumulation of dust at the racetrack, just crazy. And that combined with a setting sun shining across the racetrack had very poor visibility in store for the drivers. That led to a wreck that just kind of spiraled out of control on the front straightaway. Every driver involved, I think, was able to continue. So, in hindsight, that was just a inconvenience. After that wreck, though, because of the dust problem, NASCAR went to single file restarts for the remainder of the race, just because running too wide was not going to be feasible with all the dust. Then at the end of stage 2, they coated the track with some water to get it a little bit moist and cut back on the dust. The racing got better from there. Then let's look at the final 50 laps of the race. That's really what it came down to. It was an exciting last stage, an exciting last 2 laps as they battled for the win. Throughout the final stage, they ran green flag almost all the way, but there was great racing throughout all of it. Again, they were mostly running the bottom line, but it was still entertaining. People were still making passes. There were still things happening across the track. And eventually, the 66 of Mike Marlar, with just 4 laps to go, spun out, causing a caution that would lead to an overtime restart. The way overtime works in NASCAR is there is a 2-lap shootout to the finish. If the leader gets the white flag, that is the race. The next flag, whether it's a caution or the checkered flag, ends the race. If they don't make it to the white flag to the last lap, they'll try again. So, but they took the green flag for overtime. In the four drivers in contention, really, the leader of Joey Logano, followed by Joe Gibbs Racing teammates Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr., followed by Ricky Stenhouse Jr. They all dove into the first corner. Joey Logano got a great jump, great line, and Denny Hamlin in second, whose crew chief had told him prior to be as aggressive as he possibly could, just kind of wandered up to the high side of the racetrack. That lost him a bunch of time. Martin Truex Jr. went way up the racetrack, lost multiple spots, and all through this, the fourth place runner, Ricky Stenhouse, sent it on the bottom on both these guys, and was starting to catch the leader as they got to the last lap. And I think if they had had one more lap in the race, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. would have caught our leader, Joey Logano. But yes, Joey Logano in the 22 is your Bristol Dirt Race winner, and he is the first winner at the Bristol Dirt Track and the first winner on a dirt track in NASCAR since 1970, when the king himself, seven-time champion Richard Petty, won the last dirt race. I want to go over an interesting storyline that came out of this. The dirt guys, the dirt specialists that came into this race, really didn't do well at all. Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell, who were the favorites, wrecked. And Stuart Friesen, Chris Windom, Shane Golobic, and Mike Marlar, the guys making their Cup debut, none of them did very well. They all finished below 30th, except for Stuart Friesen, who managed to eke out a decent 23rd. But really, the only dirt guy that did very well was Ricky Stenhouse. Again, he was in that runner-up position at the end. But really, the asphalt drivers kind of schooled the rest of the field. And part of that, I think, is because after a while, the track surface, the loose layer of dirt on top of that had the cars sliding around, it got worn off and it wore down to a more packed dirt surface that raced a little more like an asphalt track. So, yeah, but then a couple last things. My experience watching this race, I would say, was overwhelmingly positive. Of course, we had to wait through rain on Saturday and Sunday that kept us from having heat races, and that delayed the race from Sunday to Monday afternoon. But I was very much entertained. It was well worth my time on this Monday afternoon, and I'm excited to say that they're going back next year. We'll get to more on that in a minute. But yeah, it was a fun race to watch. It kind of, some of it felt like, is this really happening? This is so surreal, because just racing on dirt, it's nothing I've seen NASCAR drivers ever really do. It was just so different. It was crazy watching it, but it was really, really awesome. Again, very, very much entertained with this race. So, but yeah, they are going back next year. Next year, we're not sure the date. Kind of hoping they don't put it on the same date as this year, because the past, like 5 or 6 of the last 8 of the spring Bristol races have had weather problems. So maybe they'll switch that to sometime in the summer, hopefully, when it's not monsoon season. But yeah, we'll see how they schedule that. Also, I'm kind of hoping they make that a night race, because if they do that, the track will be evenly lit. You won't have to deal with sun glare, and the dust at the track won't be as bad. Well, why not race at Knoxville or Eldora, or just some track that's a natural dirt track, rather than dumping 2,000 truckloads of dirt on Bristol again. Kind of wish they'd go to a natural dirt track, but I get the NASCAR going to Bristol because it's one of NASCAR's biggest stages, housing, I think, several 100,000 fans. They call it the last great Coliseum, for good reason. Last thing I want to go over on this is the compatibility with the next gen car. This is the new car NASCAR is introducing next year. Pretty exciting. It should race pretty well. Sounds like it's going to be especially good on the road courses. I'll talk a little bit more about that in later episodes. But there are some parts on the next gen car, like the rear diffuser on the car, and parts like that that really just aren't compatible with dirt racing. And then, of course, there's concerns about just with it being a new car, it would cost teams too much to go out there and beat up their equipment on the dirt. I've heard rumors that NASCAR may look into the possibility of running Gen 6 cars that we run now for one race next year for the Bristol Dirt. So we'll see how that turns out. And then one more thing to go over on Bristol Dirt before I move on to a interesting subject that's come up in the last few days. Joey Logano this week was our seventh different winner in seven different races this year. In fact, if you count the exhibition races, the duels and the clash that we had at Daytona before the regular season started, we've had 10 different winners in 10 different races. You've got to wonder, week after next, when we get back to racing after the Easter break at Martinsville, will we see another winner? Could we see 8 winners in 8 races and maybe more than 16 winners this year? Now, the reason that 16 is a significant number is that's the number of spots in NASCAR's playoffs. And NASCAR has a win and you're in system where if you win a race, you're in the playoffs. But if we get more than 16 winners, that could push some people out of the playoffs, which would make this a very interesting playoff season indeed. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I think drivers like Kyle Busch, Brad Keselowski, and Chase Elliott are strong at Martinsville, and I think we could see them pull off a win this next week and become our 8th different winner this season. And out of the 7 winners we've had so far this year, 2 of those have been a driver's first ever win. So yeah, it's been a pretty exciting season to watch. But now I want to go over a bit of news that just came in a couple days ago. Today at Martinsville in Virginia, the Martinsville short track, NASCAR is testing a wet weather tire. What does this mean for NASCAR? Well, first of all, we do have a wet weather tire, but we can only use it on road courses, which only make up, I think, 7 of the 36 races on the schedule. And the past few years, NASCAR has seen a lot of big issues with weather, including the past 2 Daytona 500s, which both have been delayed. But yeah, NASCAR's had some big weather issues. There was a race in Texas last fall that got pushed from Sunday all the way to Wednesday because of consistent rain showers. And yeah, NASCAR would like to avoid this as much as they can. People say, oh, NASCAR can't control the weather, and that's true. But they're trying to take some steps to avoid Mother Nature being in their way as much as it is. So what they're doing is they're taking a prototype wet weather tire to Martinsville to explore the possibility of running it on short ovals, short tracks. NASCAR has 5 short tracks on the schedule, and if this test goes well and it works and we're able to get a race in someday where it is damp on the track and we try this tire and it works, it's possible at some point down the road NASCAR could look into using a wet weather tire at bigger ovals, I think. Not tracks as long as Talladega or Daytona, which are 2.5 miles long, but it's possible they could run at a lot of the 1.5-mile racetracks like Kansas, Charlotte, and Texas in wet weather, not soaking wet, not downpour, but a damp racetrack. They might be able to run with this tire. So I saw some footage from earlier of Kyle Larson in the 5 and Chris Buescher in the 17 testing those tires out today, and from what I could tell, the cars look pretty solid. Back in the 1990s, I think 95, Terry Labonte actually took a car out on Martinsville with wet weather tires, and he could never really get over 70 miles per hour, and the back end of the car was coming around on him all the time. It just wasn't working with that car and with that tire. But from what I saw in today's footage, it looks like the cars are reaching a good 90, 100 miles an hour and are able to get plenty of traction and braking going into the tight hairpin corners of Martinsville. So if this works here, we may be seeing rain tires at a lot of other racetracks. So an exciting possibility NASCAR is exploring. I'm not sure what NASCAR's definition of this test going well is, but from what footage I've seen from the test, I think it's going well, which is great news because there is almost nothing NASCAR fans dislike as much as a rain delay. So, But that'll do it for today's episode. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this Monday's Bristol Dirt Race. Again, there's no race this weekend because of the Easter break. So everyone enjoy your weekend, and I will be back soon with actually a special video that's going to kick off a series of mine that's designed for new fans who have limited knowledge of the sport. We'll give you a start from the ground up of all about NASCAR. So excited about doing that. I will see you then. Until then, have a great weekend, and I will see you soon. This is Gunnison signing off with Spinning the Tires.